We're pleased to be joined by President Bob Kelley of the University of North Dakota. President Kelley, how are you doing?
Scott, I'm fine. How are you?
Doing well. Good to catch up with you again, and want to visit a little bit about this University of North Dakota Fighting Sioux name issue that I know is a difficult one for you. We have been talking regularly with the legislative leaders and members of the Board of Higher Education about the difficulty in getting a meeting scheduled. Sounds like they're making some progress in that regard, but not yet scheduled. And today we actually started the program by reading from the Grand Forks Herald reports of your radio interview earlier today, in which, at least according to this story, it's suggesting that you are now of the opinion it's time to change the nickname, logo, and move beyond the issue even before this NCAA meeting occurs. Is that an accurate portrayal of your comments?
Well, Scott, I'm very concerned about the position that the university now finds itself in, and it's very clear that we've got to get this resolved and move on. I think the resolution was pretty clear when the state board over a year ago directed me to start retiring the name and logo, which we did. We were fully compliant with that settlement that had been struck with the NCAA back in 2007. So I'm just becoming more and more concerned that our athletic programs, our student athletes, and the overall position that the university finds itself in is not where we want to be. We have to retire this now and move on.
So when you say retire this now and move on, you see no reason for the meeting with the NCAA?
Well, I think there's a very good reason for that, Scott. I think we do have to play this down to the final, the end of the game, if you will. I think the legislators wish to have this conversation. I think the executive branch, the governor, also would like to have this conversation. I think it will serve a purpose, but I do think that the NCAA has been very consistent and very clear that they are going to stand behind that settlement agreement. For them, it's a binding agreement. And we'll just see whether or not the conversation with the executive and legislative leadership can have any traction.
But do you at all see a problem with the fact that as the president of the University of North Dakota, you saying that it's time to retire this name and move on, even before a meeting, makes it more difficult for a potential game-changing outcome to come out of the meeting?
No, I don't think so, Scott. I think the NCAA has already stated their position. I'm very concerned that our conference affiliation may be becoming a more acute issue for us. This is not a good position for the university. I'm very concerned that our student athletes deserve to compete at the highest levels. We don't want to lose our NCAA Division I affiliation, nor do we want to jeopardize Big Sky affiliation. So I think it's time that we start speaking out on some of these issues. I don't think it's going to compromise the conversation with the NCAA.
So you think the meeting should happen, but you don't really see anything coming out of the meeting that would be any different than what position the state or the school or the Board of Higher Education is in right now?
I think this is already all out there. We've put the positions on the table. So no, I don't see anything changing.
Do you understand, though, President Kelley, the frustration of supporters of the school who say, why at every turn do we preempt, the potential for some breakthrough here? Example, Board of Higher Education didn't wait for the deadline to come. Just basically said, Standing Rock's not going to have a vote, so why wait for the deadline? Let's move forward. And people go, well, wait a minute. You had a settlement. You had a date. Why don't you continue to work this out? Instead, you're pulling the rug from underneath us before it happens. Now you have an NCAA meeting in the works with the governor of the state of North Dakota, with legislative leaders, and you have the president of the university sort of saying, same thing, why have the meeting? It's time to move on. I understand your frustration completely, but I also understand the frustration of supporters who say, the fix is in here. There's no possible way to be able to sit down and reasonably have a discussion with either Standing Rock, because we're forcing that issue before we get to the deadline, and now we're doing the same thing with the NCAA. A lot of people believe, and I don't happen to agree with them, quite honestly, but a lot of people believe because of those actions, the fix is in. That these discussions are, wink, wink, nod, nod. Summit League, why don't you go out and say that we wouldn't get in if this happens? Or Big Sky, even though you said we were in, you knew all this stuff was happening. Now all of a sudden you come out and say you got a problem with this. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Why don't you say something before this NCAA meeting? Now some progress on the meeting, and the president of the university says it's time to move on. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Do you understand why people get a little frustrated by all of this?
Well, sure I do, Scott. I think we have to look back at everything that has gone on before and recognize that virtually all of what you have said has already been put on the table. State board worked with the tribes. The chancellor worked with the tribes. We got one tribe that said yes. The other tribe consistently said no. It did not look like there was going to be any movement at Standing Rock. I think the board acted appropriately. They gave me the directive to start transitioning, but they left the door open. We started that transition, and we would have met the 15th deadline of August without any problems. Legislature, in their wisdom, decided to address the issue. We now have and I think it has positioned the university in a very uncomfortable position. We're right on the edge of a cliff now. No, I think the NCAA has been very consistent in their position. I had not talked with them. They came out with I gather, a statement on their website, their homepage. We then had conversations to see where that was going to take us. We're still open to a conversation with the legislative and executive leadership. I don't know that the door is completely closed, but the consistent statement of the NCAA has been pretty clear. So I'm not sure I buy into the idea that we're preempting any of these decisions. The doors have always been left open, and I think in some ways the reason that we are where we currently are is that we have not been able to come to closure on some of these key issues.
What do you see as a best-case scenario out of a meeting with the government leaders and the NCAA, knowing now the law of the state of North Dakota is that the University of North Dakota remain the Fighting Sioux? What would be the best possible outcome?
Well, my concern is entirely for the future of the University of North Dakota here. I'm concerned for our student athletes. I want them to be able to compete at the highest levels in Division I NCAA. I would like to see them competing against schools in the Big Sky Conference. So the best outcome for us is any outcome that would permit the university, our student athletes, our athletic program to continue in the Big Sky and continue our transition in Division I.
All right, and how about retaining the name the Fighting Sioux? Would that be a best-case scenario?
We've gone down this road before. The state board has clearly indicated that they think it's time to retire the name and logo. I've said this morning that I concur with that position. I think perhaps the best-case scenario is to have the conversation with the NCAA to realize that that door has been consistently open to crack, but doubt that it'll open up anymore. I think the best-case scenario now is to retire the name and logo and move the university forward as assertively as the community and the state leadership can, and position the university and its reputation, its D1 athletics, and its Big Sky affiliation, and help our student athletes continue to compete at the highest level.
So do I read you correctly to say at this point things are too far gone that it would not be in the best interest of the University of North Dakota to remain the Fighting Sioux, even if a deal with the NCAA to remove the sanctions as a result of that could be struck?
Well, let's see what happens with the conversation with the NCAA. Then perhaps we can revisit whatever issues come our way. But at the present time, the consistent position of the NCAA has been that they're going to hold UND's feet to the fire with this settlement.
Speaking of Division I, really the NCAA right now has said you can remain the Fighting Sioux, you just simply can't host postseason playoff tournaments, and in those games that are NCAA playoff tournaments, not wear the Fighting Sioux, right? I mean, that right now that's their sanction.
Scott, that's correct. And as we recruit student athletes, this is probably not the best position for the university to be in trying to recruit top athletes, knowing that they won't have home field advantage, home ice advantage, and won't be able to compete with their colors and their logos.
But you had said Division I was a key, and obviously that would mean you're Division I. The schools are there.
Division I as we move forward. We haven't finished the transition yet. That's correct.
And as far as Big Sky is concerned, do you believe ultimately that if the NCAA said, look, we'd prefer that the Fighting Sioux not be the Fighting Sioux. However, we've said if they continue to be the Fighting Sioux, they can't host postseason, can't wear Fighting Sioux, but otherwise that's our sanction. Big Sky, Big Ten, others, hey, we've handled this situation, and we just assume that you recognize the NCAA's handed out a punishment for this, and there's no need for others to do anything else. Doesn't the NCAA have the power to go to the others and say, we've handled this situation?
Well, that's an interesting question. Conferences have their own bylaws, and conference presidents generally provide the governance for individual conferences. In the case of the Big Sky, they are certainly a member of the NCAA, and they follow the governance and the rules and the regulations of the NCAA. But it doesn't mean that they have to completely accommodate an issue like this. To follow the scenario that you're talking about, if the NCAA does open the door on name and logo, that does not automatically mean that we would retain affiliation with the Big Sky. And if we did retain affiliation with the Big Sky, it doesn't automatically mean that the schools in the Big Sky would schedule us in all sports, as we are currently hoping.
By the way, why do you believe the Big Sky's position changed? Because they were quite aware this discussion was ongoing, was being debated in the legislature, all of that, when they announced plans to bring in the University of North Dakota, and then sort of at the 11th hour here, between the law passing and an NCAA meeting, came out with a different position. Why did that happen?
Well, I think the answer to that is that when we were admitted into the Big Sky, the name was being transitioned towards retirement. This was back in the fall of last year. When the legislative session came in, we were already in the Big Sky, but then the rules changed, and we had the law imposed upon the university, and that's when the Big Sky president started watching very carefully. I've only been to one and only meeting of the Big Sky presidents. That was just a few weeks ago. This issue came up at that time. I was asked to give a report on it, and that's where it was expressed that there was some concern on the part of the other universities and the leadership of those universities because the rules had changed since we had been admitted into the Big Sky.
All right, two quick comments, one from a listener by email and one on the phone here, and we'll let you go. The one by email here says, the legislature represents the people. The people clearly want the nickname. Does President Kelley not feel UND, a public-owned institution, has a duty to abide by the will of the people, whatever the cost may be?
You know, we certainly are a public university, and we very much recognize the people's voices in all of this. I do not believe that the people of North Dakota want to see their university diminished, nor do they want to see their student athletes deprived of competitive venues. So even though I'm listening very carefully on all of the issues in support of keeping the name and logo, it's very clear that there are substantial, compelling issues associated with that make me challenge the fact that I do not take the next logical step. I do not believe the people of North Dakota want the University of North Dakota diminished.
By the way, has there been a decision at any point for you to come out and be as forceful as you are sort of in the middle of this? I mean, I know that this has sort of gone back and forth to say, well, it's up to the governor and the legislature. It's in their camp now. The Board of Higher Ed is going to step back and evidently has gone so far as to even say, this is in your camp, Attorney General Stenjum, Governor Dalrymple, legislative leaders. Now, obviously, you're intervening here, so to speak, and that's in some ways appropriate as the president of the university, but it is a change from what happened immediately after the law passing. Did the board or board members or others encourage you to do this?
No, certainly no encouragement. I am just becoming increasingly concerned for the future of our university. And as president on my watch, I want to make my voice very clear on this. I want this university positioned appropriately on behalf of our students, our student athletes, and our national reputation. And I think it's time now for me to take a pretty firm stand on this one.
And that you're doing that completely on your own? That isn't something that the Chancellor or the Board of Higher Ed or others have directed you to do?
No, no direction. I have certainly discussed this with the President of the Board and with the Chancellor.
And a call on the phone for our guest president, Bob Kelley, University of North Dakota. Larry, go ahead. You're up on the Common Sense Club. Go ahead.
President Kelley, who pays your six-figure salary? The NCAA, the Big Sky Conference, or the citizens of North Dakota?
We know the answer to that, so your follow-up.
If you don't follow what the people of North Dakota want done, I suggest you resign and resign immediately. We're sick of outsiders telling us what
Scott,
to do.
I'm sorry. I'm not receiving any signal from you.
All right, he's not hearing you, Larry, so I'll relay it. He asked the question, who pays your salary, the NCAA, the Big Sky Conference, or the citizens of North Dakota? I said we obviously knew the answer to that one. It's obviously a state function to pay your salary as a president of one of the finest universities on the face of the planet in the University of North Dakota, and asked for a follow-up, and he said essentially, ultimately, since it's the citizens that pay your salary, it's time to listen to the citizens and what they want or resign.
Well, that's certainly his position, and I appreciate his opinion.
Larry, appreciate the call, and President Kelley, appreciate your time very much today on the program. I know this is not easy, something you've been wrestling with since your day as president of the University of North Dakota, but I'm one of those individuals that's hopeful that some cooler minds will prevail here and something can ultimately be done, which I know everybody wants in one way or another. So thanks for the time today.
God, you're very welcome.
President Bob Kelley, the University of North Dakota, our guest on the Common Sense Club and the Scott Hinton Show. More after this. Don't go away. Show more after this. Don't go away. Show more after